Hello, this is Cindy Kendall again, and we are now on video 2 of the fiscal 2018 end of year reports and preparing for the reports. In this video, we will be covering the letter from the Auditor of State and the preparation for part 1 of the annual financial report. So with that, let's continue. First of all, this is the letter from the Auditor of State, and you should have received this or gotten it off of their website up around the 16th of July. And there are just a couple of different areas that I would like to point out to you that are very important. First of all, the penalty. If you don't get this done and get it done and to the auditor by December 1, then there are some ramifications. First ramification is you need to have this information before you can prepare the budget. And the budget is what allows you to function as a city, to receive revenues and to spend expenditures. So we want to make sure that you get this done by December 1, the due date. And if you get that done, then the Department of Management has the opportunity to import the information that you're going to put into the annual financial report right into the budget forms, so you already have part of your work done. How about that for a deal? I think that's pretty cool. But we want to make sure that you do not have any problems where funds are withheld. So I'm going to help you plan how to get this all done accurately by that December 1st deadline. The other thing I'd like to call out to you in this letter is about mid-page, where it says, in addition to filing the AFR electronically, we also need to send one copy of page 1, which we'll go over in a little bit, and the proof of publication or the certification that you've posted it, depending upon your population size, to the state auditor. And again, it needs to be there on or before December 1st. We'll go over that in a little more detail in one of the later recordings. However, for right now, let's suffice to say, be careful of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving holiday is one that can really mess up the U.S. Postal Service, so we want to make sure that you get it to them by December 1st. The other thing is that you need to have this published. So you need to have time to have the proof of publication. They will also accept you doing a tear out. You buy a copy of the newspaper and just tear it out rather than having to pay to get a proof of publication. Sometimes the newspaper will charge you for those. Make sure that the date that it was posted or that it was published is indeed written right there on that newspaper, so the state auditor can see that you did this in a timely manner. We'll leave the rest of those details for now, and we're going to go on to where you're going to be able to go to the state auditor's website to get your report. This is what their homepage looks like, and as you can see from the arrow, we're going to go to the AFR. I will refer to the annual financial report or the AFR throughout this recording, but on the website they have used the initials AFR, and that is what we're looking for here. And it doesn't matter the size of city that you are or what basis of accounting you do. This is an annual financial report that has to be done by every city in the state of Iowa. If you click on that link, it will bring you further down into their website, and you can see where the information for the annual financial report is. There's different segments here that we'll go through. First of all, the Afr Search. If you want to look up last year's AFR because maybe you were not there at the time or you've misfiled it or something, you can go into this area and see the archive. The next place is where you actually download the AFR Excel spreadsheet. This is an Excel spreadsheet. It's in an older version so that we're all compatible. We'll talk about how to open it up, but this is where you would download it. The instructions there are very explicit. To download, right-click on the link, and then a pop-up window will come there, and you will see about 3 or 4 lines down that it says Save Link target as ... That is what you want to do, and I'll go through how you can save it before you even start your work. Following down on the page, after we're all done with the AFR, then you have to upload it electronically so that it is available to the state auditor. And as I mentioned on the prior slide, you also have to mail the first page of it. Those two pieces kind of go hand in hand. And we have some screenshots in a subsequent recording that we can walk you through that. That is exactly the website where you're going to be able to upload it. Don't worry about typing that URL out. I've got a shortcut for you that will be just as slick as can be. Just watch the video and see how that can work. So let's go to see what would it look like after you hit the right click and you save link as ... Okay, here's your pop-up window. This is on my computer, so you can see I have in this area, I have the desktop, and the version that I originally downloaded to make this video was version 5, and I want it to save on the desktop right now because that's going to be a place that I can find it. If you're going to move it to anywhere else other than the desktop, that you write down the path where you're going to have it, because you're going to need to have that for your proof of publication as well as for the upload. In this case, it's 5. If you're just now going to be downloading the file, it will probably end with a 6 because there have been some corrections made to the file. So let's look inside this file now. The first thing you want to do is that you'll probably have to enable the file. And that's because this file has a number of macros, they're little commands, that allow certain information to flow from one worksheet to another worksheet so that some of the numbers are going to be transported for you. You will not have to re-enter them anywhere else. This spreadsheet with the macros enabled will do all of that for you so that you don't have to worry about it. Let's also look down on the bottom of the screen and you can see that there are a number of tabs. The first one on the left-hand side is the instructions. You'll see that the next tab is in red because that is the errors. There are certain errors that the enabled macros can test for you before you even try to submit it to the state. So when we get all done, we're going to come back to that error tab and see if there's anything that we missed before we send the notice to the newspaper or post it in the 3 locations in our community. The All Funds tab is next. That tab we're going to go through in just a moment here. That is a complete summary tab, and you won't have but one column that you have to put on that and a few little things on the bottom. Again, we'll go through all those details for you. The minimum paper, they have sized it so you can take the size that you need to the newspaper and you can know about what it's going to cost, because we're all regulated on the cost of our publications. If we all use the uniform sizing, it's much easier just to get the minimum newspaper tab. The software will create it for you. The next tab, in fact the next 4 tabs, are called Revenue, P2, P3, P4, and P5, and we'll refer to them in that manner too. There are 4 different pages that take you up to P5 that we're going to put breakdowns in the revenues, and I'll go through all of those revenues with you. Then you'll see that we have 4 tabs on my screen, but there are actually 5 tabs. The first 4 will have a breakdown of all the expenditures. That very last tab has some very critical information that is going to be a different collection of things. So if you watched the video about how to prepare before you start this report, you'll have everything together anyway because I listed it all out for you. But we'll go through that in a different recording. So let's go to that P1 tab, Summary tab, and you can see this has a couple of different things going for it. First of all, if you will fill in using that little drop-down arrow right here, if you put your city's name in there, you'll see that it populates this part of your address. Make sure that that information is correct. And it will also fill in some other things on the backside. Again, I'll explain those to you when we get to them. The other thing I wanted to show you here is that these numbers are in a blue font. That blue font indicates that it's coming from some other work that you've done. It's coming up to a summary level, so that this is also your newspaper or your posting publication page. So all those numbers are coming forward, so you don't have to worry about making an error by rekeying them. Column D, however, as you can see, those are black, and that indicates that it's something that you'll have to key in. Again, when we get to that, I'll explain it in more detail. So again, put your city name in there first thing off. Here's another point. Save your work often. I know you get interrupted a lot, but please save your work and save it often. I will give you some reminders about saving your work. Part 1, which we're going to do in this video, Part 2, which is a separate video, and page 10, which is still another video, will all be done before we go back to page 1, because it again is that summary page. Here is the beginning of part 1. This is on page 2 or Rev P2, and we're going to start putting numbers in. We have given you numbers here already because we want to show you how things add up and what color the font is going to be and so forth. These are certainly not going to be any guidelines for what your numbers will be. We'll talk about what each set of numbers is all about. But before we get to that, we need you to select one of those boxes. Are you GAAP or are you non-GAAP? Most of the cities in Iowa are on a cash basis, which is non-GAAP, so that is the default for this particular page. General fund activity is always going to be in column A throughout the entire report. So you want to make sure that you have your bank reconciled and that your reconciliation for the bank numbers and your general ledger or your computer ledgers are indeed all together as a total. So if you have a sub-account within general fund, that all goes into column A. Column B are your special revenues. Most of the time you think of this as your road use tax and your local option sales tax. They're usually revenues that have a special string attached to them. In this case, you can see that there are some property taxes that are even in column B. This may be because you levy for your employee benefits. That would generate this. Or maybe you have the emergency levy. Those are special levies, and the property taxes should be recorded as a special revenue. The next column is your tax increment financing, which is also a special revenue. However, in the state of Iowa, they want us to pull that out because there's special connotations. So remember that it is TIF and TIF only in that particular column. Column D is for debt service. Debt service is for your general obligation debt and your general obligation debt only. Capital projects, maybe you have a project that is very large, you have multiple funding sources for it, or perhaps you have it goes across multiple years. Those are all reasons why you would have it in a capital project fund under column E. The permanent column deals with money that you may be given as a donation, perhaps, where you cannot spend the principal, you can only spend the interest. Another example is your perpetual care for your cemetery. Those are the types of things that are recorded in the permanent column. Column H is for proprietary. Now, proprietary, business type, utilities, whatever you're going to call them, that's all going to go into your proprietary column. Having those all commingled is very convenient. However, we would definitely emphasize that your reports to the council on a monthly basis be done on an individual basis so the council can see what the water fund is doing compared to the sewer fund, for example, if you have those two utilities. If you have internal service funds whereby you have a joint pool for supplies or for vehicles, if you budget for that, it should also go into column H. If you do not budget for it, then it is only reflected on page 1, and I'll explain how that works later. All that's going to be totaled into your grand sum, which is in column I. And every tab works the exact same way for the entire worksheet. So columns A, B, C, D, and E, and F equal column G, and that's going to be considered your governmental funds. Then columns G and H will be totaled into column I, and then column I will automatically go to the first page. All the totals are going to calculate for you automatically, which again is eliminating some of the errors that we've had in the past. So let's get into the actual detail. Property taxes is the first on the list because that's the most active revenue source that we have in the general fund. But you'll see that it's in general fund as well as it could be in special revenue or in debt service. This is information that you will have gotten from the county treasurer every month when you receive property taxes. So that should be put into a separate account so you can account for it this way. In the general fund, you're going to have maybe your $8.10 levy. Maybe you have an insurance levy for liability insurance. Those are all going to go into the general fund. And you can see that it totals there. If it's going to be in your special revenue, again, it might be the employee benefit levy or it might be your emergency levy. If you have property taxes in the debt service fund, that is going to be property taxes that you use to pay the principal and interest on general obligation bonds. And you can see that the proprietary column, column H, it's got little dots in it. That's because you cannot put property taxes into your proprietary fund. It's not allowed. Proprietary funds are supposed to be supported by user fees. Now, your special revenue fund, remember we have tax increment financing is a separate column under column C. And they want to be able to see those TIF revenues separately. And this is the only place where you can put it. Everything else has been blanked out. And that specifically is going to tie to your urban renewal report that you're getting your data prepared for. Now, going down the form, you can see that there is a total of other city taxes which belong on these lines, and it will total on line 15. Let's look at line 8. This is the utility tax replacement excise taxes. If your county treasurer gives you that breakdown, then putting the amount that was actually received into line 8 will give you a good comparison when these numbers are transferred to your budget documents, because your budget documents, those calculations are done automatically for you. So to compare what you got versus what you expect to get versus what you will get in the next year, that comparison can be done if you keep that separate on your chart of accounts. Another thing that is unique for this particular area is your local option sales tax is a special revenue, and it should be going into column B, and it's got a line of its own. If you have hotel motel tax, that one would be separate as well. So any of those things that are separated out, you should record those appropriately. The next segment is section B. This is for your licenses and permits. If you have cigarette permits or if you have a license for your vendors or something like that, that's where it would go. And most of the time it's going to be in the general fund, but as you can see, you may have a sewer hookup license. So that would go under the proprietary column, column H, or maybe a water hookup. That's also something that would go into the proprietary column. The next group, section C, is use of money and property. This is where you would include interest on line 18. Rents and royalties. If you rent City Hall, or maybe you rent a room at the community center, at the library, those are all things that would be there. If you have a farm for the sewer department, maybe you have a rent for that. So that would again go under column H on the same area. The next area is intergovernmental. Intergovernmental is a long word that says two governments are going to share something. So in this case, it's the money that another government will pay you. And we have different segments on this report for that breakdown. The first one that you'll see is going to be in the federal grants and reimbursements area. So if you had some FEMA money, for example, that would definitely be included in this area. If you have any HUD money, housing and urban development money, that would go into this area. And that's all going to be totaled on this page on line 33. Okay, we're going to be moving on to another section of D, Intergovernmental, and this time it is state shared revenues. That very first one there is your road use tax. Again, it's a very important piece of information for the states, so they put it into one cell that is easily identified. That also means that they're going to be looking to see if your road use tax revenues in your road use tax report, which is due in September, matches what you're putting into your annual financial report. But if you get any other state grants, maybe you get something from the Department of Revenue. If it pertains to like parks, then that goes into the general fund, unless maybe you're doing a really big capital project for a bike path that goes from one community to another, or something really big like that where you would put it into column E. But if it's going to be money from DNR because you have a water project or a sewer project going on and they're calling those SRF loans, that does not go on this page. We'll show you where that goes later. But that is from the DNR, but on the other hand, it does not belong in this area. This is only going to be for grants and reimbursements, not money that you're borrowing. On line 54, commercial and industrial replacement is where you're going to see the backfill dollars. You can see here we've gotten the breakdown from the treasurer. Again, some of it goes into general, some of it goes into the special revenue, and some of it goes into debt service, because again, that's the state's promise to reimburse us for property taxes that commercial and industrial users do not have to pay because of the tax law. So again, that's a reimbursement from the state. The next one we're going to talk about are local grants and reimbursements. Now, these grants and reimbursements may be from the county or maybe from a township. You can see that there's a separate line for each of those. The county may give you money for a library service. That goes into one of its own. Maybe you have an agreement whereby the county allows you to have some of the road use tax money so that you can do the street improvements or you can do the street maintenance. Township contributions, it's real important that that would be going into the general fund. The system is going to add all of the federal and the state and the local grants and reimbursements and give you a total on line 71. So now we're going to move to section E, which is charges for services. As you can see, it starts out with water and sewer in column H, so that should be pretty straightforward. However, in column A, you can see that there is a landfill/garbage. Now, if you have a situation where you hire the garbage out to somebody and all you pay is the tipping fee at the landfill, you're not trying to run it so that revenues equal expenditures like you would in a utility. So this would be a revenue into the general fund that you're just keeping track of the amount of the fee that is being put into the general fund, instead of having a actual proprietary on there. Here you go again. Save your work often. So if you've not saved before we got to this page, maybe it's a good reminder. The next page is section E, and we're continuing with the charges and fees for service. You can see a number of different things that are listed there. The one for specify, you can see that we don't have anything specified in there, but on the other hand, sometimes it's a good thing to put a note there. If nothing else, it explains it to your council or explains it to your citizens, or maybe if somebody asks you about what is there, you don't have to go look it up. You'd be able to say, oh yeah, I remember that's there because we keep track of this separately. Now we're going to look at section F, which is the special assessments. A special assessment is when the citizens and the city share in the cost of a project. Usually it's curb and gutter or a street improvement or something like that. And then you have the ability, if a person doesn't want to come in and pay it all up front, their portion, they can spread it out across 10, 15 years and have it applied onto their property taxes. So every year they just make that annual payment right along with their property taxes. Then the treasurer will in turn send that money to you, and they will give you a breakdown as to the fact that it's an assessment. It's not property taxes. And then that assessment will pay the city back for the money that the citizen owed. The next one is miscellaneous, and here we have a number of different things pretty much that don't fit anywhere else. Contributions. A lot of times you're going to see that you have library book memorials. That's a place where this is going to be notified. The other thing would be fines, is a very popular one. If you have internal service charges, you see again, if it's budgeted, it's going to be on line 112 and you'll count for it in column H. And then there's some other ones. Again, if you put the notes there, then you're not going to have to go back and look it up. If you're concerned about what accounts go into which of these individual lines, be sure to look at the chart of accounts. During the introduction video, I gave you a copy of this form, and in that form I designated which fund numbers would go into each of the columns, and then on each line I noted which account numbers would fit into that line. So if you need some help with that, maybe you'd want to go and download that tool. So now we're going to look at total revenues, and then we're going to tackle section H. Again, the spreadsheet automatically does this for you, but if you for some reason are not tying to the total revenues that are on the printout that you got off your computer, or the total revenues for all funds that you have on your manual books, this might help you do a little troubleshooting. This is a good place for you to tie, and if you have just skipped an account when you're putting it in the detail, then by all means this is a good way of double checking that. Section H, proceeds of bonds, loans, and notes, except TIF internal borrowing. Okay, so we're looking at lines 124 through 126. This is the area where if you have a note from the bank and they're giving you money to buy a truck, or giving you money that you're borrowing to do a street project, this is the area where you would record that. And you would record it in the area that you're going to spend it out. So let's say you're going to borrow money and you plan on using property taxes to pay it back, then it's going to go in the debt service column. Or if you're going to use it for a specific capital project, it might go into the capital project fund. If you're borrowing money to do a water project or a sewer project, maybe it's one of those SRF loans, or maybe it's one of those USDA loans, then you would put that into the proprietary column. Line 127 and line 128 deal with transfers in, taking money from one fund and putting it into another fund. This is where you're going to record the inside of that particular project. But you're going to want to make sure that you separate the tax increment financing loans from any other kind of loan or transfer. Let's say that you spent the money out of the general fund last year for a particular TIF project, but because of timing, you didn't receive the TIF revenues until this fiscal year. So that's going to be something that you're going to transfer into the general fund, so it would go in column A. The transfer out is on a different page, so we'll worry about the TIF transfer out separately. When all is said and done, all of your transfers in will equal all of your transfers out, because it's from one fund to another. There's nothing new coming external from the external. That, of course, will all total for you on line 131. So we're going to look at line 132, and you're going to see that it's a total revenues except for your beginning cash balance. But that one is going to be going on to line 134. This, as you can see, is in black font. So you need to enter this from your clerk's balances July 1 of 2017. Or you could go to last year's annual financial report to see by fund type what your ending cash balance was on last year's AFR. As long as your computer totals and your AFR matched last year perfectly. If they did not match for whatever reason and you have had to make a correction, make the correction here, and then we're going to need to put a note on page 10 under the remarks area explaining why it didn't match and what you've done to correct it. Then you can see that line 136 is total revenues and other financing sources. which includes your beginning cash balance. So those become resources. Again, when we get to page 9, you'll see that that is also going to turn out to be the same total. That means that you're balancing well, but we'll celebrate when we get to that point.